Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open maybe one of the most surprising historical documents around. And it's not in some dusty archive, it's actually inside the very DNA of Colombia.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like uncovering a hidden history book written in cells.
Exactly. And, researchers have found something pretty incredible. Colombia's genetic makeup is, well, one of the most diverse in all of Latin America. It's this like living tapestry. You've got indigenous roots, African resilience, European influence, all woven together.
Yeah, a powerful image.
But here's the twist. This amazing diversity isn't just biologically interesting. It's actually pretty complex, even controversial in some ways.
That's true. It touches on a lot of sensitive areas.
So the big question we're tackling is, what makes this this genetic profile so special? And why does it spark so much debate?
Right.
Our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack all of that. The history, the biology, the societal stuff, to help you really get why this genetic story matters so much.
And it starts with history, really.
Yeah.
You can almost read Colombia's past right there in the DNA. The colonization, the terrible history of the slave trade, but also the incredible survival of indigenous peoples. It's all etched in there.
So what does that look like, genetically speaking? What's the breakdown?
Well, studies show that on average, and averages are just a starting point, mind you, Colombians are roughly 60% European,
Okay.
but 29% Amerindian, which is the term for indigenous ancestry,
Right.
and around 11% African.
Okay, 60, 29, 11. But you said average, so it varies.
Oh, dramatically.
Yes.
That's what's so striking. These numbers aren't fixed across the country at all. If you go to the coastal regions, for instance, the African ancestry component often jumps way up
Yeah.
to 30%, sometimes even 40%.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is. But then head up high into the Andes Mountains, into certain communities there, indigenous ancestry can easily be over 50%, sometimes much higher.
Incredible regional shift.
Exactly. And remember, we're talking about a country with over 52 million people. That scale makes this diversity really significant, not just for Colombia, but globally. It makes the Colombian genome maybe one of the clearest reflections we have of Latin America's really complex mixed identity.
It's fascinating how history leaves such a deep imprint. For centuries, there was this narrative, right, that indigenous Colombians had been pushed to the margins, maybe even, well, almost erased by colonization.
That was definitely a prevailing idea, that their presence had faded, become more cultural memory than sort of living reality.
Yeah.
But that's where the genetic science comes in with a really powerful counterpoint. What geneticists have found basically challenges that whole narrative head on. Indigenous DNA, it's still deeply, profoundly present.
How present are we talking?
Well, get this. There are entire Andean communities today where people carry 80 to 90% indigenous ancestry.
80, 90%.
Yeah.
Still.
It's remarkable. This isn't just about, preserving traditions. It's actual genetic continuity. It's living proof of the resilience, the sheer survival of groups like the Huisca, the Nasa, the Wayuu against really overwhelming odds.
So it's not just history, it's ongoing presence.
Precisely. Genetic continuity.
Okay, so beyond these powerful historical and cultural stories, what about the practical side? How does this incredible genetic mix affect things like health, adaptation?
Ah, yes, the health implications are huge and really complex. For example, researchers have identified certain gene variants common in people with African ancestry.
Okay.
Variants passed down through generations that seem to offer some natural resistance to tropical diseases like malaria, but kind of genetic legacy.
Makes sense, adaptation.
Right. But interestingly, those same genetic patterns can sometimes correlate with a higher risk for other conditions, like hypertension.
Huh, a double-edged sword, almost.
In a way, yes. And then you look at variants common in indigenous populations. These can influence things like metabolism, how the body processes energy, and crucially, lung capacity. Especially clear in highland populations living way up, above 2,500 meters. They're genetically adapted to thrive in thin air.
So their bodies literally work differently because of their genes.
To some extent, yes. And all this variation makes Colombia a really key place for studying something called personalized medicine.
Personalized medicine, tailoring treatments based on DNA.
Exactly. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, imagine designing a drug or therapy specifically for someone's unique genetic makeup, maybe targeting a metabolic pathway found only in certain remote Andean communities. Colombia's diversity makes it a sort of natural laboratory for figuring this out.
That sounds incredibly promising for the future of healthcare.
It holds enormous potential, absolutely.
But you hinted earlier, it's not all straightforward, is it? There are controversies swirling around these genetic studies in Colombia. What's the friction about?
Yeah, it's a delicate area. There are several big concerns. One major worry is that genetic studies, even when done with purely scientific intent, could end up reinforcing racial divisions.
How so?
Well, in a society that already struggles with issues like colorism and inequality, some argue that putting percentages on Ancestry risks hardening those categories, that scientific labels could unintentionally prop up social hierarchies.
I see. Sort of quantifying difference in a way that could be misused socially?
Precisely. Then there's a second big issue: fears about exploitation. Worries that foreign researchers might collect Colombian DNA, sometimes people call this biopiracy, maybe for commercial gain,
Right.
without ensuring that the local communities whose genetic heritage it is actually benefit or have control over how it's used.
That touches on really deep issues of ownership and history.
Absolutely. Given the colonial past, it's incredibly sensitive. And there's a political dimension, too. Some Colombians worry genetic data could be, well, weaponized, used to define who counts as more indigenous or more African, potentially leading to exclusion rather than celebrating the mix.
So it fuels internal divisions, potentially.
That's the fear. It creates this real tension. Science sees this amazing diversity and wants to study it, understand it. But society is understandably cautious, asking, how will this knowledge be used? Who benefits? Could it harm us?
It's a tough balance. Which brings us to the bigger picture. You said Colombia's story isn't just local.
No, not at all. It has global relevance. That unique mix, European, African, Indigenous, all interacting over centuries, makes Colombia a super important case study for understanding human migration patterns across the globe, how populations adapt, how diseases work differently in different groups. The insights are huge.
But are we actually tapping into that potential? Is Colombian DNA well represented in research?
That's the crucial point. It's not. Like most of Latin America, actually. Colombia is severely underrepresented in the big global DNA databases. We're talking less than 2% of the genetic data worldwide.
Less than 2%. Seriously.
Seriously. So there's this massive gap. It means the Colombian gene, this rich source of information, still has so much more to teach us. There's a vast amount of untapped knowledge there that could benefit everyone, not just Colombians.
So let's circle back then. Our initial question. Why is the Colombia gene so special? It feels like the answer is...
Well, it's this powerful story of mixing, of survival, where indigenous roots met African strength, met European migration, all converging in the DNA of one nation. It's a living blueprint.
Exactly. And different people see its significance differently. Scientists look at it and see, invaluable lessons for medicine, for mapping human history. Historians see it as undeniable proof of resilience, a testament to survival against the odds.
A story of enduring, definitely. But then you have the critics, and their warning is vital. Without strong ethics, without genuine respect for the communities involved, without thinking carefully about the social impact, genetics could end up dividing us more than uniting us, despite all its potential.
That's a really powerful point to end on. This genetic map holds so much past, so much potential future, but also these really deep questions about who we are, how we connect. So let me turn it over to you, the listener. What do you think? Should Colombians embrace this incredible genetic diversity as a core source of national pride, or is identity something that should maybe be left more to culture, to lived experience rather than DNA percentages?